Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Tuesday afternoon. We've got a great show for you guys today. We're going to start out with a lot of stuff, some serious stuff. We got, of course, food stamps on the chopping block. I'm going to explain the rule change that Republicans are using to try to cut food stamps for 3 million families. Then we're also going to talk about the Trump-inspired domestic terrorist, Cesar Sayoc. He is in court, and there's a picture that's being painted that's very interesting of the person that basically revered Donald Trump as everything that he wanted to be. So we'll talk about that. That's really kind of fascinating and super, super sad. I mean, imagine looking up to somebody like Donald Trump. Then we're going to talk about Betsy DeVos. And how she is personally gaining from Donald Trump. I mean, you know, the Trump presidency, how she's gained financially. And so that's interesting as well because it's corruption. Then we have some silliness from Fox News, of course, talking about the minimum wage. Hey, look, we'll save it for that. Then we've got Ivanka Trump and the United Kingston. Interesting. And then we also have some good news at the end. We're going to talk about a church congregation that turned its back on a Trump-loving minister or a Trump-loving pastor. So that's fantastic. You're going to love that. All right. Anyway, so here's what we're going to do. Before we get into the show, I want to thank some patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you guys can fund the show. We're definitely in need, thanks to YouTube changes, the algorithm, constant demonetization, et cetera, et cetera. I've explained that quite a few times. I will continue to explain it as much as I need to basically, you know, protect independent progressive media. So that's why we need you guys to continue to have us on the air. So thanking some patrons here. We've got Vincent Muskie, Anna Mujica, James Fernandez, Yvonne Woolman, Eve Langner, and FPH. Don't know what that stands for, but FPH. Thank you. Thank you to all of those patrons. Patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can sign up. That's how you can support us. As well as, of course, signing up to be a channel member. To do that, just hit the join button. Okay. Anyway, so with that said, let's kind of dive into some of the more serious stuff, but please like and share the stream too. So that's also super important. Like and share, especially share. Okay. Now let's move on. Okay. Now, there are new developments in the case of Cesar Sayoc. Now, lawyers for Mr. Sayoc, who is known as a massive Trump fan, who attempted to mail pipe bombs to prominent Democrats, his lawyers are now saying that President Trump's rhetoric is to blame for inspiring his would-be attacks. Now, lawyers and court officials in federal court met on Monday to discuss what's going to happen to Sayoc. He's facing some very serious charges and apparently is very remorseful and apologetic for his would-be attacks. So these details are actually incredibly sad and sort of disturbing. Now, one of the details, of course, is his love and admiration for Donald Trump. Now, it's been there long before he became president, and also more details about Sayoc's limited mental capacity, including his forays with steroids and other drugs. Now, Sayoc, his attorneys wrote in a sentencing memo filed in federal court in New York on Monday, was a, quote, Trump superfan and began to consider Democrats as not just dangerous in theory, but imminently and seriously dangerous to his personal safety. So he believed, thanks to the rhetoric coming out from right-wing media and from Donald Trump himself, that Democrats were threatening his life. not Trump's life, but Sayoc's life. So he thought, man, the liberals, they're coming for me. The Antifa, they're going to kill me. I got to do something about it. Now, President Trump, according to the lawyers, wrote, did nothing to dissuade this message. Their filing cites Trump's Twitter attacks on the figures that Sayoc targeted. Now, look, in many cases, by the way, I can point out how Trump had doubled down on the rhetoric, the attacks, or didn't discount it. I mean, for example, we have the conspiracy that George Soros, who was one of the recipients of these would-be pipe bombs that were non-functional, thank goodness. Not because I have a specific love for George Soros. I hate the effect that he has on our politics by giving millions and millions of dollars, even if I might agree with some of the causes that he gives money to. I just don't want that kind of influence in our politics, and I don't want it from anybody, the right or left. So let me be clear about that. But so one of the conspiracy theories is that George Soros was using his considerable wealth to fund migrant caravans to come replace Americans. I mean, that's a complete and total insanity, but it's something that they actually truly believe. At least some of these people believe that. Sayoc possibly being one of them. Now, Trump, when challenged on that, said, I don't know. I hear that's what's happening. It could be happening. No, it's not. It's an insane conspiracy theory. There's no evidence of that. There's no proof of that. There's nothing. It's, again, insanity. But that's just one example. There's a lot of other examples. And there's also examples of Donald Trump basically saying, hey, you should go after my political enemies. For example, he called out the press as the enemy of the people, praised Greg Gianforte, who body slammed a reporter. You also had video of Trump telling his supporters that, hey, look, if there are protesters, beat the crap out of them. Don't worry, I'll pay your legal bills. He is the master of projection as well as the master of victimhood. So you get somebody who's not mentally there following this guy, looking up to Donald Trump as Trump tells him, I'm under attack. My enemies, my political enemies, they're trying to destroy me. Somebody's got to do something. That's the implicit, emotion that is elicited or message that is sent. You got to do something. Danger. They're coming for me. Now, Sayoc's attorney offered a bit of look into the descent of his madness into Donald Trump. Sayoc was a Trump fan before the reality television host ran for president and viewed him as everything he wanted to be. Self-made, successful, and a playboy, his attorneys wrote. Okay, that's weird. You have basically an admiration. You see everything that I want to be. He's everything I want to be. Not harmful in itself, but based on complete and total lies. It is a fabrication. It is an image that has been carefully cultivated throughout the years through PR and media, and the fact, of course, that Trump, his family, had a lot of money. So that's what money will get you, even if it's something that you didn't earn, money that you didn't earn yourself. Now, there's more. What really started, apparently, to lead him down this rabbit hole is cable news, specifically Fox News. Sayoc, they wrote, began to watch Fox News religiously, started following political news on Facebook, and threw himself into Trump's campaign once he announced his candidacy because he came to view Trump as a personal champion. Someone who had helped him through the most difficult periods of his life and who could do the same for other people across the country. Now, anybody who knows the history of Donald Trump knows that he is not a champion of regular people. He's not a champion of working people, right? And so he's nobody's personal champion except for Donald Trump. So again, super, super sad, but he had this image of Trump as, oh, you don't understand. Not only is he wealthy and successful, he actually cares about me, people like me, which of course in his policies is not reflected, or his words not reflected at all. Now, Sayoc, his lawyers wrote, began watching Fox News religiously at the gym, planning his morning workout to coincide with Fox and Friends his evenings to dovetail with Sean Hannity. Yikes. They added that with his use of steroids, he became paranoid and delusional about the false news stories that clogged his social media feed. And they also added in that he had limited cognitive abilities and mental illness. And because of that, quote, he believed outlandish reports in the news and on social media, which increasingly made him unhinged. Now, let me just stop there. You don't have to be mentally, limited or off to believe in the deluge of fake news from the Republican side. Because you have a lot of Trump supporters who are perfectly normal cognitively that believe in some of the most crazy things, insane conspiracy theories. So saying that, I mean, I get what his lawyers are trying to do because it's his lawyers, right? They're trying to make the argument that, no, the guy's crazy and normal people don't believe in this. In fact, later on, there's a section where it said that, hey, look, most people don't believe this. They just look at Trump's statements as more hyperbole, but Sayoc took it much more personally. I would argue that it's not just Sayoc, it's not just people with mental illness. It's a nice little scapegoat. But in reality, there is at least a third of the country that believes in insane things, and they don't have mental illness to fall back on. These are under other circumstances perfectly rational people that because of this rhetoric, because of the news media, because of Fox News and right-wing pundits, believe in some of the most insane stuff. Okay, now anyway, they said that because of his cognitive limitations, he believed in this fake news and became obsessed with so-called attacks from those he perceived as Donald Trump's enemies. He believed stories shared on Facebook that Trump supporters were being beaten in the streets. He came to believe that he was being personally targeted for supporting Trump. Mr. Sayoc thought that anti-Trump forces were trying to hurt him, and they were to blame when his van became vandalized. So, look, are there instances of people attacking Trump supporters? Yeah, sure, it has happened. It's terrible. Andy knows one of them, and us on the left, we're not in favor of that, right? We're totally against that. You don't stand for us when you do and perpetrate acts of violence. And so it has happened, right? Now, has attacks against people who are against Trump happened as well? Yes, and I would argue a lot more forcefully or a lot more often. And so that is unfortunate that here you have, one side that for the most part perpetuates a majority of the violence, but you have people on the other side who think, oh, no, it's the left. It's all the left that's the violent ones. When in reality, it's been shown through studies that the majority of violence, especially domestic terror, is actually from the far right, the right-wing groups. So, anyway, now let me give you that quote here from Sayoc's attorneys that I mentioned earlier. A rational observer may have brushed off Trump's tweets as hyperbole, but Mr. Sayoc took them to heart. And again, here's the thing, okay? When you have a leader out there, or when you have pundits out there that are constantly saying, I'm under attack, this is war, this is the kind of language that they're using, right? They hate America. Look, just recently, I think it was earlier today or possibly yesterday, there's a rally Donald Trump was at, and he was railing against, again, the members of the squad, AOC, saying that not only, are they anti-America, they hate America, but they also hate Israel, they hate all Jewish people, they're the worst. Now, for somebody whose mind is unhinged, what message does that send? What does it tell? Not only does it say, oh my God, these people are horrible, they're the enemy, they hate everybody, but, well, what do you do when somebody's an enemy? You're trying to bring down America. Well, you got to do something. You got to do something about it. And so that's what Sayoc was brought to, and they call that stochastic terrorism. Okay? And so they believe, there is a subsection in this country, like Sayoc, that believes in the constant lies that come out of the right wing and Trump's mouth. And again, Fox News, definitely to blame for spreading a lot of this garbage misinformation, but you also have, other pundits on the right. And so, that's a huge problem. They rile people up, and it's, no surprise that when they do that, there are certain people that someone, they hear all this stuff. They hear all this absolute garbage, and they think, I got to do something about it. They're the enemy of the people. I'm the people. They're my enemy. I got to do something about it. And so that's where we're at. Now, Sayoc's mother, actually, this is Madeline Sayoc, right? She said in a statement last year, imploring President Trump to calm down the rhetoric, right? She said, our political leaders like President Trump need to recognize that there are many sick people in this country who take their rhetoric and words of war with the media and war with the Democrats to heart. Now, that was last year. Has he done that? Well, no. Again, what's dominated the headlines for the past week and a half is him telling four, young women of color, progressives, to go back to their crime-infested, crime-ridden, corruption-ridden countries. If you don't like America, leave America. You should go. And of course, if that's not enough evidence, here you have, just take a look at his Twitter feed. There's video, there's Twitter, there are news stories every day about how he continues to make attacks against others, while, of course, claiming him the victim. And now here's the irony about all this, right? People like AOC, people like the Squad, the progressives, right? We actually want to help people like Sayoc before they become violent. Look at his situation, right? Sayoc's lawyers wrote that their client was pushed to the margins of society by a series of traumatic events that, of course, could happen to anybody, right? In addition to his learning disabilities, he also had a issue of child sexual abuse, estrangement from his family, drug dependency, and then, of course, losing everything in the Great Recession. So the guy was basically on the edge. And then the Great Recession pushed him off of it. By 2018, they write, he was living alone in a decrepit and cramped van that had been his home for more than a decade. A typical day saw Mr. Sayoc waking up in his van, showering at the gym, and cooking crock-pot meals while inside a DJ booth of a strip club before heading off to his second job delivering pizza. He had 2 jobs. As he grew older and more isolated, excessive steroid use increased his feelings of anxiety and paranoia. In this darkness, they wrote, Mr. Sayoc found light in Donald J. Trump. How that right there is a tragedy unto itself. How could somebody look at someone like Donald Trump and think, no, that's my light. That's my guiding light. That's my guy. He cares about me. But look, here's the other thing, right? What he did, of course, deserves punishment. You don't just send, even if it's non-functional pipe bombs to people. That's unacceptable, right? But I'm trying to look at this guy as a fellow human being, right? And so I know some of you may be like, I don't care what's befallen him, what kind of problems he's faced. I care what he did, and he put people in danger, and I can completely understand that view. And I totally get it, and what he did, completely unacceptable, right? But at the same time, here you had somebody working 2 jobs, no home, no mental health care, which he obviously needed, no health care at all, no light, no hope. That was lured in by the false promise that is Donald Trump and the right wing. That false promise was built on a mountain of lies and spread by Fox News and right-wing media. This is why rhetoric matters. This is one reason why the far right is so incredibly dangerous. This charged language about the enemies, about being at war with each other, the constant imagery of doing violence against people on what they consider to be the left, which, except for in isolated cases, involving, for example, Antifa, doesn't really happen. We don't really have that kind of problem on the left because the left doesn't believe in violence. We defeat them in the ballot box and then do policy that helps us all live to better lives, which is what we've always been trying to do, to move progress and to help people like Sayoc before they become violent. And so this is just an incredibly sad story all around. There's no good people. But in Sayoc, we have a clear example of a society that has failed someone. And what did that person have to turn to? Fascism. If there's a lesson to be learned, it's that we need to do everything in our power to prevent that. Because this is how fascism rises. Okay. Let's move on. I think I'll put the Betsy DeVos story over here because I'm already, getting low on time. It's crazy. All right. Moving on. Let's go to food stamps. Now, Trump's USDA is now looking to enact a rule change that would cut food stamps for millions of Americans. Now, this is under USDA Chief Sonny Perdue. And in a call with reporters on Monday, he said that the rule change that they're looking at would end automatic food stamp eligibility for those receiving other forms of federal and state assistance. So, for example, if you're getting welfare, well, then you don't get food stamps, which is insane because welfare doesn't actually give all that much. I know there's this myth about, oh, no, you're making so much on welfare. In reality, TANF, which is what welfare is now called, thanks to Bill Clinton, is actually incredibly limited, and incredibly limited in the time that you can actually use it. So there's a lot of misinformation about welfare, and of course, this basically built on it. It's built on that misinformation. So they say, oh, well, if you're already getting help by the state, well, then you don't need food stamps, and that's not at all true. Now, as the Washington Post reports, current rules give states latitude to raise SNAP income eligibility limits so that low-income families with housing and childcare costs that consume a sizable share of their income can continue to receive help affording adequate food. Because right now, again, people need childcare so they can actually go to work. A lot of these people do work or have disabilities, etc. And so these states go, okay, look, you're doing your best. A lot of things are expensive, so we'll continue to give you something that you can continue to, have food. Now, the option, also allows states to adopt less restrictive asset tests so that family seniors and people with disability can have a modest savings or own their own home without losing their SNAP benefits. Now, this rule change would basically end all that and allow these states to be much, much more restrictive. Now, think about this, right? Now, some people might be like, well, wait a minute. They own their own house, so why do you need food stamps? I mean, houses are expensive. Yes, but consider the 65-year-old, right? Worked all their lives, paid off their house, but now all they have is retirement, Social Security, right? Or even disability. Well, they own a house, but that doesn't mean that their income is enough to guarantee that they could buy food or at least healthy meals. There are tens of millions of people in this country that live in situations where they depend on this program and actually do have assets. And so here's the thing. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they don't make enough money from either working or, again, they're disabled. But let's focus on the people who are working, right? Or who can work, who are not disabled. So you still have people out there, millions of people, that don't make enough money to survive on their own. Even members of our military, for example, E1s, they do not make enough money from working for the military, which, again, we fund the military, the Pentagon, to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, over $700 billion a year. That is the most of any other country, and actually more than every other country in the world combined. And yet we still can't pay our troops enough to where they don't have to rely on food stamps? That's insanity. It's complete insanity. In fact, commissaries are a huge, I should say, a huge amount of food SNAP money ends up going into the commissaries on base. So you have, members of the military and members of military families, right? Now you want to say those people are lazy? You want to say those people can't have a little bit of savings? You're saying those people can't have houses because they might also lose their benefits. But it's not just them, again, people who are working. But again, you have children, the elderly, and disabled. Now, some people might be like, but Jeff, you don't understand, right? How can you have small savings? If you have a small savings, if you can afford to save a little bit of money, well, then obviously you can afford to buy food and not have to be on the dole. Get off the dole, get off the dole. You ever thought that maybe the only reason they could save a little bit of that money is because they have that little bit of food security? And besides, what would that money go for? Probably not a new iPhone. No, it might go to medical bills or at least a medical emergency. Less than half the country can afford a $400 emergency. I mean, that's complete insanity. It's not as if these people are wealthy. I mean, they might be saving, what, $20 a week or $20 a month, $25, $50 at most, right? And if you put that away for quite a bit of time, then you'll have a little bit of a savings. We're not talking hundreds or tens of thousands of dollars on this, right? Now, there's the other argument that comes inevitably from the right wing, and it's, hey, man, look, why don't they just get a job, full employment? If they have a crappy job that doesn't pay enough, they just get a better job. Well, as I've alluded to before, again, most people on SNAP are the elderly and disabled, and those that are not in those two categories, they do end up working. And so sometimes they work, one job or two jobs, right? It's not an issue of laziness or unwillingness to get a job or to get a better job, right? This is a problem of pay. If wages had kept up with inflation and productivity, the minimum wage would be near $30 an hour. I know that sounds crazy, but then again, since the 1970s, CEO compensation has increased by over 930%. So what's more crazy, right? An increase in the minimum wage, even to $15 an hour, which is a 100% increase, right? You have doubled the federal minimum wage, 100%. You still have 930% for CEO compensation. Insanity. Look, not only that, but remember the last time the federal minimum wage had increased. It was about 2009, right? It went from $5.25 to $7.25. I remember working in the stock room at a grocery store when I ended up getting that raise. And you know what happened? Nothing. I mean, people got a raise. The economy didn't fall apart. There weren't giant amounts of layoffs the last time that there was a raise in the minimum wage. No. If minimum wage increases destroy the economy, it would have imploded already because we've had so many different raises throughout the years. Oh, but Jeff, you don't understand. $15 an hour, that's huge. No, it's only $30,000 a year. That's not that much. So those conservative pundits, again, they're wrong. But like I said, people who work for a living should make enough to not need to survive on food stamps and on government assistance. And those who are on it that can't work should not have it taken away just because they might have a couple bucks stored away in the savings account for an emergency. This is another hole in the social safety net that they are cutting. Now, Senator Debbie Stabenow, top Democrat in the Senate Agriculture Committee, said in a statement on Tuesday that this rule would, quote, take food away from families, prevent children from getting school meals, and make it harder for states to administer food assistance. This proposal is yet another attempt by this administration to circumvent Congress and make harmful changes to nutrition assistance that have been repeatedly rejected on a bipartisan basis. And why is it rejected? Well, it turns out there's a lot of people who are Trump supporters, who are Republicans, that are poor enough to be on food assistance. In fact, most of the assistance ends up going to red states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Kentucky, etc. Those are majority Republican areas, and they get most of that food assistance, And so that ends up hurting their own constituents, which, of course, you start taking away their food, you start taking away their stuff, well, then they're going to start getting very angry. Now, here's the thing. What's the goal of this? Well, the goal is not to introduce people to the dignity of work. Again, you already know a lot of people on food stamps already work. It's also not to stop dependency because, again, most people don't want to have to need food stamps. Nobody wants to be dependent on the government. No, what it is that it's another way to practice social Darwinism. Only the strong, so only the wealthy are entitled to food. Only the wealthy are entitled to education. Only the wealthy are entitled to survive. If you're poor, you're SOL. Now, for a supposedly Christian nation, not my description. That's their description, since they want this country to be a Christian country. For a supposed Christian country, it is a very weird and very selfish, punitive worldview. But unfortunately, that explains it. Okay. So I'm going to take a break here. We'll come back. I'll read some comments, some super chats, and then we'll get into Fox News and what Brian Kilmeade thinks about the tipped minimum wage. You're going to love that story. Plenty more. Stay right here. We'll be right back. Around the Nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Walder here with you. So I got some great comments to share with you guys, from you guys. First, let's go to the super chat from Jedi Mullet 77. He says, the Pentagon can't pass an official audit wasting trillions of our tax dollars. Excuse me. What bums. If the offense contractors want more money, they should just get multiple jobs. Same goes for multinational corporations. So, excuse me there for a second. That was weird. Okay. Then Sarge Tech says, billions and billions for the military. It's okay to let the weak and sick starve. We must have a strong military for our next war to kill more humans. Yeah. That's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, billions of dollars for the so-called defense contractors, or as Mullet points out, the offense contractors who make money off bombing other people. Doesn't matter who those people are, but they usually end up being brown people, minorities, Muslims, etc., people in South America. And so, I mean, unfortunately, we have this deep-seated corruption that allows that system to go on without being challenged. It's been accepted. It's the new normal. And there's a lot of people that just, think that's the way it goes. That's American exceptionalism. Zach Sherman says, I worked in restaurants my whole life, never made enough without having a second job. It shouldn't be that way. That'll be a pretty good segue to our next story here, as we are going to talk about Brian Kilmeade's wonderful adventures in being a busboy. So let's get into that story. Sometimes, man. Sometimes. Yikes. All right. The hosts of Fox and Friends were not thrilled that the Democratic-led House just passed a $15 an hour minimum wage. So now they launched into a tirade about how working those minimum wage jobs was actually amazing and that you should just shut up and accept whatever you get. Take a look.
Like many of you, I've had probably about 5 to 7 tip jobs. I started as a busboy. I used to do a bus, clear the tables, and we used to rotate washing the dishes. And at the end of the day, you pool your tips. It's one of the best jobs you can have when you're breaking in. You don't even expect that check. It's almost a surprise when you get a $60 or $70 check at the end of the week because you work hard, you get great tips, and if you're good, guess what? Other restaurants want you. They will take you off of your better jobs. And if your one job doesn't pay enough, guess what you do? You get another job. That's what you do in your 20s. Having 2 jobs, part-time jobs while going to school, is something people have done since the turn of the last century. And now all of a sudden people want to make that job something you can make a career out of while destroying small businesses. And those owners work about 60 hours a week. And now you're telling them their labor force has got to make more maybe than they do?
Well,
Forget
and a minimum wage job is not meant to be a career.
Of course.
It's meant to help you get your start. We were all in high school. We were in college when we had these when I was waiting tables.
Yeah.
Unless you're at a very fine restaurant, most of those people at the fine restaurants, that is their career.
Right.
But they make tons of money. If you're working at a McDonald's or a small little restaurant where you're making tips, you're right. If you're nice to the people, you make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
So what do you
other restaurants can hear about you when they want you.
Correct.
All right, there's a lot of insanity to unpack, right? But I just got to ask, what kind of world are they living in? This isn't 1985. Things don't work like that anymore. Now, if you would actually work, and look, I don't know if Brian Kilmeade literally bust tables. Maybe he did. Maybe Ainsley Earnhardt did. I don't know. But right now, they're incredibly well-paid Fox News hosts. And I'll get into how much Kilmeade makes, actually. But here's the thing. Anybody who's working now, because the economy is different than it was back then 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? Things have changed. You ask anybody working in fast food right now, in a restaurant, they will tell you that. But see, here's the thing. Who's the guy who's having so much fun busting tables, busting their ass, that when they get the $60 to $70 a week check, that they're like, oh, wow, I got paid for this. I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. I'm having just so much fun bussing these tables and cleaning them off and everything. Oh, what a surprise. $60 to $70 a week. What? I mean, come on, dude. Really, average rents over, what, $1,400 is the average rent in America? Obviously, that average skews upward because of most people live in big cities like Seattle, LA, San Francisco, New York, etc. But $60, $70 a week, you can't afford a one-bedroom apartment making $60 to $70 a week. That is not very much money. I mean, that's insanity. But okay, so now there's more, right? So now look, they're talking about the tip minimum wage, right? Oh, so, you work at a restaurant, you make decent tips, right? And if you don't make enough, well, you just go to another restaurant that makes decent tips. Oh, okay, well, do some people make a decent living off, tips? Yeah, some do. As it was mentioned, it's kind of ironic that they say this, right? People at high-end restaurants can make good money off tips, right? Because they're mainly serving rich people. And I say this is ironic because Ainsley Earhardt, who said that, said, well, I mean, look, working at restaurants, it's not a career. Being a server, it's not a career. It's for somebody out of high school, unless you work at a high-paying restaurant, a high-end restaurant. Well, then, of course, it's a career. But there's no difference other than where you're actually working at. So basically what she says is that unless you're working for rich people, unless you're serving the wealthy, then you don't deserve a living wage for your work, even though it's the exact same work. And remember, $15 an hour is only $30,000 a year. Now, you want to compare that to Brian Kilmeade and his $4 million a year haul for working at Fox News. Brian Kilmeade's worth $8 million. Now, I sure love it. If there's one thing that I love is when people that are worth millions of dollars tell me how these minimum wage jobs are amazing and we should be happy with low pay. And if we're not, well, I mean, you can just go out and get a better paying server job somewhere else. You know what I mean? I mean, he did say, if you want more pay, do a better job and a better restaurant will want you. Again, that's not how it works. Well, if you're just nice to people, then they'll tip you better and you'll make a lot of money. Not true at all. I mean, here's the thing. The reliance on tipping, you realize that puts the responsibility of paying a server a fair wage onto the customer, not the company, but you're shifting that burden, that cost burden, onto the customer. Isn't it better to pay, and more fair to pay a living wage to everybody and eliminate tipping altogether? I mean, that makes sense to me. I know that there's some servers that are like, no, you don't understand. I actually make more with tips. Perhaps you do. But again, it's sort of uneven, right? There are servers that end up with a lot less. And there's also tip pooling, like I said before. It seems a little bit more stable because then you're not relying on the customer to supplement your wage. And by the way, the other argument that's always against minimum wages, well, they're going to pass it into the customers anyway, that extra cost. What do you think tipping does? Tipping also passes the cost on to the customer. And so any price increase, and this has been borne out in studies too, would actually be a lot less than any prospective tip anyway. So keep that in mind. So now, look, there's plenty of ridiculous things. One is when, of course, where they included McDonald's in, what would be considered a tipped restaurant. Have you ever been to McDonald's? You don't tip at McDonald's. What McDonald's has ever had you leave a tip for the server, who, yes, normally makes minimum wage? I mean, do they even know any real people outside their social bubble, outside their class? Have they ever talked to a person working at McDonald's? Of course not. Of course, they have no idea that, McDonald's workers don't get you know, they don't get tipped. They also don't even know how much the tipped minimum wage is. I'll get to that in a minute. Ducey, right? So Ducey, Steve Ducey, not a smart person, right? Obviously not somebody who knows anything about what he's talking about. He said that currently, and I did not realize this, the federal minimum wage for tipped employees is $2.13 an hour. He didn't know that? He didn't know that. Oh, come on, man. Don't you think that would be required reading? Something that you should know if you're going to have a conversation on the minimum wage? Oh, but of course not. It's Fox News. Of course. It's Fox and Friends. So, yeah, they're not going to know. Their entire audience is mostly out-of-touch boomers and wealthy people. They don't know what it's like in today's economy. They still think it's the same as back in their day, where you could work your way up in the company, and that these jobs were made for high school students, college students, that you could pay your college tuition, but just working at McDonald's for the summer. No, that's not how it works anymore. Now what we have is that we have a service sector because we no longer have a large manufacturing base like we used to. Most of the jobs are in the service sector, right? Most of the jobs are minimum wage or very, very close to minimum wage. It's not the same. We have people in their 30s with families that are trying to survive because good jobs, good paying jobs are no longer here or are not accessible without expensive college degrees or years of experience gained from unpaid internships. And who can do unpaid internships? Well, of course, people who are already set, people who are already fairly wealthy. They have a huge, huge advantage. That is the reality in today's economy. And while there is a good demand for people in skilled trades, where pay is actually pretty good, not everybody can do those jobs. Let me give you an example. I will use myself as an example. So I used to work at a factory, right? And there are welding jobs all over the place, right? So welders, they make good pay. I can't weld to save my life. I know because I literally set myself on fire. I am not cut out for that job. My welds were terrible, and I caught myself on fire, literally. I can't do that job. That's not the job for me. That's not a job for people with very poor spatial reasoning or any type of natural clumsiness, which I, of course, have in spades. Some jobs people can't do. And so, look, that's really the kind of the point, right? Oh, you can just go get another job that pays better. No, you can't, because not everybody can do those different jobs. Everybody has different skills. Everybody has different things that they're actually good at. And so they have to find a job that they're actually good at that they can actually do. And that's not always available. And if it happens to be making food, preparing food or serving food, that is what you're good at, then why should you be consigned to a life of poverty because of your natural skill set? I just don't understand, right? So, and that goes, of course, to why do we look down on people who prepare and serve food? I mean, that a job's a job, right? It should pay the minimum that an adult needs to survive, because most of the people working in these jobs are adults and they do have families. And so what they're saying on Fox News, oh, these jobs are just for kids. Well, if they're just for kids, then how come there are so many adults that are stuck working in them despite these conditions? Oh, they just want these jobs to be forever jobs. You ever wonder why? Because nobody I talk to at McDonald's likes working at McDonald's or wants to have a career at McDonald's working the drive-thru for the rest of their lives. Nobody wants to make a career out of that, but they're in that position because they have no other choice. And so at least if we're going to have an economy where a lot of these people are in jobs they might hate, but they're stuck in, at least we want to make sure that they don't have to be broke and completely destitute while doing these jobs. So it is time to lift the wage. It's time for America to have some economic justice. Okay. All right. I really don't have that much time, do I? Damn. All right, so let's go to the church story. It's probably my favorite story of the day. So let's do that. A Virginia pastor is facing a revolt from his own congregation after he put up a sign echoing comments from President Trump. So now this is Pastor E.W. Lucas of Friendship Baptist Church in Appomattox, Virginia. And I love the irony that it's the Friendship Church. Well, he's not making friends with these signs. He made headlines last week after putting up the sign, "America, love it. I love it if you don't leave it." Okay. Now, the pastor put up the sign the same week that Donald Trump went after the squad and told them to go back to their crime-infested, corrupt countries. He said, and he was talking to Virginia station WSET, quote, people that feel hard about our president and want to down the president and down the country and everything, they ought to go over there and live in these other countries for a little while. Okay, so look, I'm going to have a disagreement with this pastor. Since when is downing the president downing the entire country? The president is not the country. I'm just saying. And look, here's the thing, right? So for 8 years, a lot of Republicans were downing the president, President Obama. Now, were they downing the entire country? No. But apparently the same rules do not apply when a Republican is in power. So you could trash the president all you want, over and over, calling those some of the worst things, Kenyan Muslim socialists, create like, imagery, violent imagery, do mock hangings, mock executions of the president. Now that's fine, because that's not downing the country. But if you down Donald Trump, if you point out, when you point out some of his policies and some of the damage that he has done to this country, the very fabric, oh no, you're downing the president and you're downing the United States. There are two different sets of rules here, apparently. One for the right wing, one for the left wing, apparently. But again, when it was right-wingers that were criticizing Obama because apparently they say that they love America and they despise the Kenyan Muslim usurper who was leading America, for some reason they said, oh no, Obama hates America even though he's leading America. But when his left is concerned for things like children in cages, the exploding deficit, the environmental destruction, white nationalism, etc., well, suddenly they're the ones that hate America, and they should leave because they want to fix it. It's interesting how that works. But this did not go well with his congregation. And here's the good part of this story, right? This past Sunday, members of his church decided to walk out in protest. According to WSET, the church was empty for its 11 a.m. service. Nobody there. They said, look, we don't like this. We don't like the rhetoric. We don't like what you're saying. We're definitely against what you're doing. This is not the spirit of religion. This is not the spirit of Jesus, right? According to the news outlet, hundreds more people expressed their either support or opposition to the sign on social media, pointing to decisions made under President Trump and his administration. William Thompson, who I guess was on the fence, said it's up to each individual person. Ultimately, if we have problems, we should try to fix it. Well, we do have problems. Massive student loan debt, lack of health care for millions, crumbling infrastructure, trade deficits with other countries, a trade war with China, endless warfare in the Middle East costing trillions of dollars, as well as thousands of lives. We have plenty of problems. Okay? So, and the irony, of course, is that the squad is pointing out these problems and actually tries to look for solutions, which is what Thompson added. He said, support is the biggest thing we need, support and fixes. Well, we got fixes. We got fixes. But you know what? You know who's standing in the way? Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell. They're the ones that are preventing any sort of progress, right? $15 minimum wage. House is passing, right? So, I mean, that would raise the wage very slowly, ending at, $15 an hour at 2025. Republicans don't want that to happen. They don't want to fix that problem. Donald Trump's infrastructure plan involves private industry basically taking over roads, putting up toll booths everywhere. That's his infrastructure plan. It's a plan for the economy. Cut taxes on the rich and corporations and increase the income and wealth divide. Make the rich richer and the poor poorer. That's not fixes. Those are the problems. And so, again, what the squad is doing is saying, no, we want Medicare for all. We want this, free college. We want to solve these problems. Infrastructure bank. We want to do all these things. Green New Deal. Here's what we're trying to do. And you can disagree with their approach and say, I don't know if that'll work, right? I believe it will work. But you cannot say that they don't love this country and are doing their damnedest to try to fix it. But for Trump, you can't really say that at this point because almost everything he does so far, or has done, has directly benefited himself or members of his social class. So, who really loves this country? I can't speak for Donald Trump, but I think he loves himself, in my opinion, more than he loves America. That's just what I see. Okay. Wrong button. Okay. That's all I got for you guys today. Please like and share the stream. Consider supporting us on Patreon or becoming a channel member. Subscribe as well. That really helps. Yeah. So like, share, subscribe, etc. Support us and all that stuff. And we'll have another great show coming up tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern right here around the nation, TYT Nation. Thank you all. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.